This is the official Grunge Iceberg. Iceberg videos embody fandom. Copious amounts of research are gathered to go into a video to reveal information about a particular subject to pique the curiosity of those interested. The research study is organized into tiers of levels, each representing how well known that aspect of fandom is. Level 1 is the sound. This is for casual people who have recently discovered the 90s grunge scene. Without further ado, let's get into it. Sub Pop is a recording label founded in 1986 by Bruce Pavitt and Jonathan Poneman. Sub Pop achieved fame in the early 1990s for signing Seattle bands such as Nirvana, Soundgarden, and Mudhoney, central players in the grunge movement. They are often credited with helping popularize grunge music. In November 1988, Sub Pop released Love Buzz, the debut single by Aberdeen, Washington band Nirvana. As the first entry in the Sub Pop Singles Club, a subscription service that would allow subscribers to receive singles by the label on a monthly basis by mail. At its peak in 1990, the club had 2,000 subscribers. By 1991, Sub Pop were in financial difficulties, leading Mudhoney and Tad to depart the label and delaying the release of the Afghan Whigs Congregation. When Geffen Records bought Nirvana's contract from Sub Pop for $72,000, it was agreed that the former would pay the latter a percentage of any profits from the band's major label debut, Nevermind. A stipulation was also implemented where selected future Nirvana studio LPs were required to carry the Sub Pop logo alongside Geffen's. The album's subsequent commercial success quickly brought Sub Pop out of their financial difficulties. Sub Pop slowly started to fade away, and the label is still going today, but it's not nearly as popular as it was in the early 90s. Nirvana was formed by singer and guitarist Kurt Cobain and bassist Chris Novoselic, who met while attending Aberdeen High School in Washington State. The pair became friends while frequenting the practice space of the Melvins. Cobain wanted to form a band with Novoselic, but Novoselic did not respond for a long period. Cobain gave him a demo tape of his project Fecal Matter. 3 years after the two first met, Novoselic notified Cobain that he had finally listened to the Fecal Matter demo tape and wanted to form a band.
I couldn't find anyone in my hometown to play with until I met Chris.
Dale Crover, the drummer for the Melvins, and I made a demo in like 85, late 85, and at my aunt's house on a 4-track. And I had the tape for about a year or so. And I was always trying to push it on my friends, to try to get them into starting a band with me. And one day Chris, after probably hearing it a few times, just decided, hey, this is pretty good.
I didn't see much future for those guys. They were pretty much bordering on retarded, bums, basically, unemployed, and rock and roll made them millionaires.
Things came together really fast. Within a week, we had a set. I think we had like a half-hour set.
It was just so amazing, to actually play. I'd heard these songs because they were recorded, but all the instruments were dubbed, They played them live in a room, It was amazing. It was like the most incredible thing I've ever done.
Nirvana released Bleach in June 1989 and became a favorite of college radio stations. Nirvana embarked on its first national tour, but canceled the last few dates and returned to Washington State due to increasing differences with Jason Everman. No one told Everman he was fired, but he later said he had to quit. Although Sub Pop did not promote Bleach as much as other releases, it was a steady seller and had initial sales of 40,000 copies. However, Cobain was upset by the label's lack of promotion and distribution. In late 1989, Nirvana recorded the Blue EP with producer Steve Fisk. In an interview with Rob, Cobain said the band's music was changing. The early songs were really angry, but as time goes on, the songs are getting poppier, and poppier as I get happier and happier. The songs are now about conflicts and relationships, emotional things with other human beings. In September 1990, Buzz Osborne of the Melvins introduced the band to drummer Dave Grohl, whose Washington, D.C. band Scream had broken up. Grohl auditioned for Novoselic and Cobain days after arriving in Seattle. Novoselic later said, "We knew in 2 minutes that he was the right drummer." Grohl told Q, "I remember being in the same room with them and thinking, what? That's Nirvana? Are you kidding? Because on the record cover they looked like psycho lumberjacks. I was like, what? That little dude and that big motherfucker? You're kidding me?" In 1991, Nirvana signed with DGC Records and released their second album, titled Nevermind. DGC Records was hoping to sell 250,000 copies of Nevermind, the same they had achieved with Sonic Youth's Goo. However, their first single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, quickly gained momentum, boosted by their major airplay of the music video on MTV. As Nirvana toured Europe during late 1991, the band found that its shows were dangerously oversold, that television crews were becoming a constant presence on stage, and that Smells Like Teen Spirit was almost omnipresent on radio and music television. By Christmas 1991, Nevermind was selling 400,000 copies a week in the US. In January 1992, the album displaced Michael Jackson's Dangerous at #1 on the Billboard album charts, and topped the charts in numerous other countries. The release of Nevermind made Nirvana the biggest stars in music, seemingly overnight.
Nirvana! Mais de 2 milhões de discos vendidos nos Estados Unidos! Primeiro lugar na parada de rock de todo o mundo! A melhor banda de rock pesado do planeta! Pô, você ainda não tem esse disco? Você tá ficando muito careta! Nirvana, Nevermind!
MTV is a music and television media company formed in the early 1980s that promoted rock music and music videos. In the early 1990s, the idea of music videos took off, and MTV created other shows, such as MTV News. The video for Smells Like Teen Spirit was picked up by MTV, and it spread like wildfire across the entire globe, not only putting Nirvana on the map, but MTV as well. Most from the 90s will remember the voice of Kurt Loder, a journalist for MTV who covered everything rock-related and was the face of MTV News. MTV is also heavily credited for killing standard radio as the only way to enjoy music, as music videos were some of the most popular things to watch during the 90s. MTV appealed to youth culture instead of usual entertainment, which appealed to an older, more mature audience. Seattle, Washington is one of the biggest hotbeds for alternative music in the world, even today. Artists like Jimi Hendrix and other rock acts were made in Seattle. The city is probably the biggest hotspot in the Pacific Northwest, and is the backdrop for almost every topic discussed in this video. Lane Staley met guitarist Jerry Cantrell at a party in Seattle around August 1987. A few months prior, Cantrell had watched a concert of Alice in Chains in his hometown at the Tacoma Little Theater and was impressed by Staley's voice. Cantrell was also homeless after being kicked out of his family's house, so Staley invited Cantrell to live with him at the rehearsal studio Music Bank, and the two struggling musicians became roommates. Staley then joined a funk band. Cantrell's band Diamond Lie broke up and he wanted to form a new band, so Staley gave him the phone number of Melinda Starr, the girlfriend of drummer Sean Kinney, so that Cantrell could talk to him. Cantrell called the number and set up a meeting with Kinney. Kinney and his girlfriend went to the music bank and listened to Cantrell's demos, who mentioned that they needed a bass player to jam with them, and he had someone in mind, Mike Starr, with whom Cantrell had played in a band in Burien called Gypsy Rose. Kinney then mentioned that his girlfriend was actually Mike Starr's sister, and that he had been playing in bands together with Starr since they were kids. Kinney called Starr, and a few days later, he started jamming with him and Cantrell at the music bank, but they didn't have a singer. Staley's funk band also required a guitarist at the time, and Staley asked Cantrell to join as a sideman. Cantrell agreed on the condition that Staley join his band. Because Cantrell, Starr, and Kinney wanted Staley to be their lead singer, they started auditioning terrible lead singers in front of Staley to send a hint. The last straw for Lane was when they auditioned a male stripper. He decided to join the band after that. Eventually the funk project broke up, and in 1987, Staley joined Cantrell's band on a full-time basis. Alice in Chains soon released a promotional EP called We Die Young. The EP's lead single, We Die Young, became a hit on metal radio. After its success, Alice in Chains' label rushed the band's debut album into production with producer Dave Jordan. Cantrell stated the album was intended to have a moody aura that was a direct result of the brooding atmosphere and feel of Seattle. The resulting album Facelift was released on August 21st, 1990, peaking at number 42 in the summer of 1991 on the Billboard 200 chart. Facelift was not an instant success, selling under 40,000 copies in the first 6 months of release, until MTV added Man in the Box to regular daytime rotation. The single hit number 18 on the mainstream rock charts, with the album's follow-up single, Sea of Sorrow, reaching number 27, and in 6 weeks, Facelift sold 400,000 copies in the US.
We've been together for about 2.5 years, and we signed a contract with CBS last Christmas about that time. We recorded the album in March, so it's been relatively quick, a lot of the things that we've done from that point on, but waiting for it all to happen took quite a while.
Tell me about the guy who helped you produce, and my curiosity about that is, you need a producer. Well, not always, but when you're doing your first album, somebody says you have to have a producer. It doesn't always happen.
So basically, the record company is really concerned about that fact, because they want to make sure that it's going to have credibility and it's going to have the right production value. We looked at a couple people, and Dave really appealed to us because...
By the way, his name's Dave.
Dave Jordan, yeah.
Smells Like Teen Spirit is the hit song written by Nirvana, which was released on the band's 1991 album, Nevermind. The song is widely regarded as one of the most famous Seattle grunge songs of all time, and one of the most famous songs ever written. Grunge-styled clothing was a marketing ploy in the early 90s by clothing companies in order to put a stamp on the newfound genre, and use it to sell tattered flannels, ripped jeans, and Doc Martens. Heroin is a powerful opioid that is derived from poppies. Heroin played a huge part in the Seattle scene in the 90s, and tragically took the lives of 5 prevalent grunge musicians. Heroin and Seattle grunge went together like peanut butter and jelly, and it's still talked about whenever the Seattle sound is brought up. Soundgarden was an American rock band formed in Seattle, Washington in 1984 by singer and drummer Chris Cornell, lead guitarist Kim Thale, and bassist Hiro Yamamoto. Cornell switched to rhythm guitar in 1985, replaced on drums initially by Scott Sundquist, and later by Matt Cameron in 1986. Yamamoto left in 1989 and was replaced initially by Jason Everman and shortly thereafter by Ben Shepherd. A Soundgarden performance one night impressed KCMU DJ Jonathan Poman, who later said, "I saw this band that was everything rock music should be." Poman offered to fund a release by the band, so Thale suggested he team up with Bruce Pavitt. Poman offered to contribute $20,000 in funding for Sub Pop, effectively turning it into a full-fledged record label. Soundgarden signed to Sub Pop, and the label released Hunted Down in 1987 as the band's first single. The band released the album Bad Motorfinger on October 8, 1991. Steve Huey of AllMusic said that the songwriting on Bad Motorfinger takes a quantum leap in focus and consistency. Although eclipsed at the time of its release by the sudden popularity of Nirvana's Nevermind, the focus on attention brought by Nevermind to the Seattle scene helped Soundgarden gain wider attention. The singles Outshined and Rusty Cage were able to find an audience on alternative rock radio and MTV. Bad Motorfinger was nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Male Performance in 1992, and was among the 100 top-selling albums of that year.
Us, Soundgarden. We have Kim and Chris. How you guys doing?
Oh, fine. Real well.
Where were you guys when you found out that you were nominated for a Grammy?
Asleep on a bus.
Yeah, in Ottawa.
Uh-huh. And what was your reaction like?
Go back to sleep. Why'd you wake me up?
Yeah.
It's real easy.
Well, you know, sleep is a hard thing to come by, and you know, Grammy nominations, dime a dozen. So.
Oh yeah.
We just went right back to sleep. And that's why we look so good now, because we got a lot of rest.
Did you call your parents?
I did. I called Kim's parents, and they're real proud. Parents really like that sort of thing, you know.
Yeah, those are the things you tell them.
Well, they can call their friends and say, you know, tune in on this such and such a night, and you'll see a picture of my son's face on the screen, and you'll know that all those years that I spent chasing him around and having him arrested weren't a waste of time.
Courtney Love and Kurt Cobain formally met in a nightclub in Portland on January 12, 1990, but Love had apparently developed a crush on the Nirvana frontman after seeing him perform at a gig earlier that year. Cobain appeared to dismiss Love's advances at first, commenting, "I was determined to be a bachelor for a few months, but I knew I liked Courtney so much right away that it was a really hard struggle to stay away from her for so many months." Not long after making things official, Courtney Love married Nirvana's Kurt Cobain on Waikiki Beach, Hawaii on February 24, 1992. Kurt famously wore his pajamas to the wedding ceremony, while Love donned a white lace and satin gown. Among the 8 guests was Kurt's Nirvana bandmate and now Foo Fighters frontman, Dave Grohl. Wood is a song by Alice in Chains, written by guitarist and vocalist Jerry Cantrell as a tribute to his friend, Andrew Wood, lead vocalist of Mother Love Bone, who died in 1990. Cantrell sings the verses of the song, while Lane Staley sings the chorus. The song first appeared on the soundtrack to the 1992 film Singles, where the members of Alice in Chains make a cameo appearance, and later appeared on the band's second studio album Dirt, also released in 1992. On April 8, 1994, Kurt Cobain, the lead singer of Nirvana, was found dead at his home on Lake Washington Boulevard in Seattle, Washington. Forensic investigators and a coroner later determined that Cobain had died on April 5th, 3 days prior to the discovery of his body. The Seattle Post-Intelligencer reported that Cobain was high on heroin when he pulled the trigger. The paper reported that the toxicological test determined that the level of morphine in Cobain's bloodstream was 1.52 milligrams per liter, and that there was evidence of Valium in his blood.
I'm Kurt Loder with MTV News. Nirvana leader Kurt Cobain, an extraordinarily gifted singer, songwriter, and guitarist, was found dead in Seattle on Friday morning. Apparently, his body was found at a house that he owned but didn't live in anymore on Lake Washington Boulevard. He was discovered by an electrician who was doing some work on the house, found nearby, according to the electrician who found him, ended with the words, "I love you, I love you, I love you." Nirvana had been struggling with fame and fortune, which came overnight with the release of their album Nevermind, and we talked to them around that time, and here's the condition the band was in at that point.
Dirt is the second studio album by Alice in Chains. It was released on September 29, 1992 by Columbia Records. Peaking at number 6 on the Billboard 200 chart, the album received critical acclaim. It has been certified quadruple platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America, making Dirt the band's highest-selling album to date. It was the band's last album, recorded with all 4 original members, as bassist Mike Starr was fired in January 1993 while the band was on tour. In late 1987, Stone Gossard and Jeff Ament began playing with Malfunction vocalist Andrew Wood, eventually organizing the band Mother Love Bone. In 1988 and 1989, the band recorded and toured, increasing interest. Polygram signed the band in early 1989. Mother Love Bone's debut album Apple was released in July 1990, 4 months after Wood died of a heroin overdose. Ament and Gossard were devastated by the death of Wood and the resulting demise of Mother Love Bone. Gossard spent his time afterwards writing material that was harder edged than what he had been doing previously. After a few months, Gossard started practicing with fellow Seattle guitarist Mike McCready, whose band Shadow had broken up. McCready in turn encouraged Gossard to reconnect with Ament. After practicing for a while, the trio sent out a 5-song demo tape in order to find a new singer and a drummer. Eddie Vedder was the lead vocalist for San Diego band Bad Radio and worked part-time at a gas station. He listened to the tape shortly before going surfing, where lyrics came to him. He then recorded the vocals to 3 of the songs, Alive, Once, and Footsteps. Vedder sent the tape with his vocals back to the 3 Seattle musicians, who were impressed enough to fly Vedder up to Seattle for an audition. Within a week, Vedder had joined the band. Released on August 27, 1991, 10, named after Mookie Baylock's jersey number, contained 11 tracks dealing with dark subjects like depression, loneliness, and more. 10's musical style, influenced by classic rock, combined an expansive harmonic vocabulary with an anthemic sound. The album was slow to sell, but by the second half of 1992, it became a breakthrough success, being certified gold and reaching number 2 on the Billboard charts. 10 produced the hit singles Alive, Even Flow, and Jeremy. With the success of 10, Pearl Jam became a key member of the Seattle grunge explosion, along with Alice in Chains, Nirvana, and Soundgarden.
To the Headbangers Ball. Now, a long time ago, it's like a lot of the bands came from LA, but now it seems like a lot of the great bands are coming from the Seattle area, and Pearl Jam is one of those bands, and I'd like to welcome Eddie and Mike from the band Pearl Jam to the show.
How's it going, Rich?
We're a great band.
Great band. Now, it's true that there really is a big Seattle scene happening right now with Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, and I mean, even Queensryche and stuff like that.
Well, they're all good people, too, which is which is great.
Now, a lot of you guys, I mean, two of your members that aren't here right now, Stone and Jeff, were in Mother Love Bone together. And how did the rest of you guys all kind of hook up?
I was surfing in San Diego and I heard from my friend Jack, who used to be in the Chili Peppers and is now in a band called 11, which is amazing. But Stone and Jeff asked him if he wanted to play drums, and he couldn't because of 11, but I got a call to try singing. So I sent up a tape, and all of a sudden I was living in Seattle.
So you're not really originally from Seattle then, right?
No, I'm total
import.
But you are?
I am, yeah.
So you got kind of wrapped up into this whole Seattle.
Yeah,
rock fang now.
I'd known Stone for about 10 years, had known him for a long time. We used to trade rock pictures and all that a long time ago when we were little kids.
I'm going to move on from discussing Layne Staley, Chris Cornell, Kurt Cobain, and 10, due to the fact I have 3 full-length documentaries out about those 3, and I just covered 10 in my Pearl Jam entry. So let's move on to the next. The Frances Bean Cobain controversy comes from the fact that Courtney Love used heroin during her pregnancy with Kurt and Courtney's only child. Frances was also taken away from Kurt and Courtney for a period, before they regained custody soon after. I'm once again going to skip over Bad Motorfinger, Nevermind, and 10, as those albums have been covered in previous videos of mine, and I'm going to link those below. Let's move on to the next. Mudhoney is a band formed in Seattle, Washington on January 1st, 1988, following the demise of Green River. Its members are singer and rhythm guitarist Mark Arm, lead guitarist Steve Turner, bassist Guy Madison, and drummer Dan Peters. Original bassist Matt Lutkin left the band in 1999, but rejoined the band in December 2000 for a tour that lasted through January 2001. Mudhoney is often referred to as the grandfather of the grunge movement, as their releases on the Sub Pop label, particularly their debut single, Touch Me I'm Sick, and the Super Fuzz Big Muff EP, were instrumental in the creation of the grunge genre. The Middle of the Iceberg is information that is less common knowledge to most people. During band practice for the Metallica tour, Layne showed up to practice high, where Sean Kinney and Jerry Cantrell vowed to never play with Layne ever again. Alice in Chains manager Susan Silver would release a statement saying the band was withdrawing from the Metallica tour and their Woodstock appearance due to ongoing health problems in the band. During the Metallica tour, James Hetfield, as well as Jason Newsted, would mock Layne for his addiction and for pulling out of the tour. Mark Lanegan was born on November 25, 1964, in Ellensburg, Washington. Lanegan supposedly came from a family of criminals, convicts, and hillbillies. Lanegan's mom was a schoolteacher, and his father was a carpenter. Lanegan is most well known for forming the band Screaming Trees. As well as being in the Trees, Lanegan is known for his extremely close friendships with Layne Staley and Kurt Cobain. His memoir, Sing Backwards and Weep, showcased hundreds of untold stories from that era of grunge music. Two conflicting stories of how frontman Scott Weiland and bassist Robert DeLeo met have been related by the band. One was that they met at the Black Flag concert in Long Beach, California in 1985. They began discussing their girlfriends, only to realize they were dating the same woman. Instead of letting this come between them, they developed a bond and formed a band after they each subsequently broke up with a girl. Weiland presented a different version in his autobiography, saying that he and his friends in their band Side to Side, guitarist Corey Hiscock and drummer David Allen pursued Robert after witnessing him play at various live performances. Regardless, Weiland, DeLeo, Hiscock, and Allen would eventually form a band called Swing. Allen left after a few years. The remaining members saw drummer Eric Kratz play in a Long Beach club and convinced him to join them. Guitarist Hiscock eventually left the band in 1989. In need of a replacement and auditioning many guitarists, Robert suggested his older brother Dean. At the time, Dean was a successful businessman who had left behind his previous musical career but still played guitar as a hobby. The band managed to convince Dean to play for Swing, completing the original STP lineup. Dean reportedly refused to continue playing in a band called Swing, and shortly afterwards the band became Mighty Joe Young. They recorded a demo tape around 1990. The Mighty Joe Young demo features tracks that would go on to be re-recorded for the band's first studio album, as well as some musical styles that would not be featured on any of STP's studio music albums, such as funk and yodeling. Mighty Joe Young played several gigs in the San Diego area, building up a fan base. Their first show was supporting Henry Rollins at the Whiskey A Go-Go. The group then began to work on their debut album with Brendan O'Brien. During the recording, they received a call from their lawyer, who informed them that there was a bluesman who had already claimed the name Mighty Joe Young. Inspired by the STP motor oil stickers that the band members were fans of in their youth, various ideas on the initials STP were shared by the band before they settled on the name Stone Temple Pilots.
Try to put out whatever emotions we were feeling and just do it simply. We didn't want to go in and screw around with things for too long, and we were pretty happy with the material we had, and we liked the way it sounded. We think we made a pretty good album, and it was just like, all right, well, we had a great time making the record. We played a lot of basketball, a lot of ping pong, drank a lot of beer, and I guess at that point it's kind of just up to people whether they like it or if they don't. I mean, I'm really happy that it's been embraced by the people that actually buy records.
On July 7th, 1993, vocalist and frontwoman for upcoming grunge band The Gits was found dead near an intersection in Seattle. On July 7th, 1993, at around 2 a.m., Maya Zapata left local bar The Comet Tavern in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Capitol Hill was well known for being a rough neighborhood and had more heroin addicts than anywhere else in the United States at the time. She stayed at a basement apartment located a block away from the tavern, and before heading home, she stopped at a friend's house. This was the last time Zapata was seen. At 3:30 a.m., the body of a woman was found in Seattle's Central District. It is believed Maya encountered her killer shortly after 2:15 a.m., leaving only 15 minutes for Zapata to leave the tavern and quickly visit a friend before encountering her killer. In 2001, after the case was cold for 8 years, using new DNA evidence, forensics teams used a DNA sample from a bite mark found on Zapata's body, kept in cold storage until the STR technology was developed for full extraction. In 2003, a match came into the database and identified Zapata's killer as Florida fisherman Jesus Mezquia. Later that year, Mezquia's case went to trial. He maintained his innocence throughout. It was established Mezquia did not know Maya Zapata, and that he saw her leave the bar in 1993 before following her and killing her in a completely random attack. In 2004, Mezquia was found guilty of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 37 years in prison. On January 21, 2021, Jesus Mezquia died in a Washington hospital at the age of 66, serving 17 years of his 36-year sentence. 7 Year Bitch was formed in 1990 by vocalist Celine Vigil, guitarist Stephanie Sargent, bassist Elizabeth Davis, and drummer Valerie Agnew. Vigil, Sargent, and Agnew have been playing together in the Seattle band Barbie's Dream Car when their bassist left for Europe. They subsequently recruited Davis and renamed their band after the movie 7 Year Itch, based on a suggestion by their friend Ben London, a member of fellow Seattle band Alcohol Funny Car. At their first concert, the band opened for the Gits, who had proved to have a significant influence on their music. In 1991, the band released their first single, Lorna, and signed with CZ Records. Stephanie Sargent was found dead in her Capitol Hill apartment on June 28, 1992, after consuming alcohol and using heroin at a party after having been sober for 8 months. She returned home and passed out on her back. She died of asphyxiation after vomiting, having failed to wake up. Sargent died while 7 Year Bitch was recording their first full album, Sick 'Em, which was released in October 1992 and was dedicated to her. Seven Year Bitch's second album, I Viva Zapata, is a tribute to both Sargent and the Gits lead singer, Mia Zapata. Jar of Flies is the third studio EP by Alice in Chains. It was released on January 25, 1994 by Columbia Records. The band's second acoustic EP after 1992's Sap, it was the first EP in music history to debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart, with the first week sales exceeding 141,000 copies in the United States. The self-produced record was written and recorded over the course of just 1 week at London Bridge Studio in Seattle. The tracks No Excuses, I Stay Away, and Don't Follow were released as singles to promote the EP. Jar of Flies was nominated for 2 Grammy Awards in 1995. Lane Staley began using heroin in the early 1990s. After stints of getting sober and relapsing, around 1994, Lane gave up on trying to break free from his addiction. Lane's severe drug addiction was not a secret within the grunge scene, and it seemed that his death was inevitable.
When you have a problem with heroin, does it automatically make you think about death because you're playing with your life a lot? Or?
Yeah, I suppose that comes with the territory. You're flirting with death, and that's probably what's most attractive about it at first, is the danger, you know.
Soundgarden's fourth studio album, 1994's Super Unknown, proved to be the band's breakthrough album upon its release in March 1994. Super Unknown debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. The album launched several successful singles, including Spoonman and Black Hole Sun, and brought the band international recognition. Super Unknown achieved platinum status in the United States, triple platinum status in Canada, and gold status in the United Kingdom, Sweden, and the Netherlands. Vitology is the third album by Pearl Jam, released on November 22, 1994 on Epic Records. Pearl Jam wrote and recorded Vitology while touring behind its previous album, Verse. The album's sound is more diverse than previous releases and consists of aggressive rock sounds, ballads, and other stylistic elements, making it Pearl Jam's most experimental album at that period. Considered a departure from the grunge sound of the band's first 2 albums, the record focuses more on punk rock and hardcore styles in its production. On March 16, 1990, Andrew Wood, lead singer of Mother Love Bone, was found in a comatose state by his girlfriend, having overdosed on heroin. He was taken to Harborview Hospital and placed on life support. On March 19th, physicians suggested that Wood be removed from life support, and he was pronounced dead at 3:15 p.m. that day. The official cause of death recorded on Wood's death certificate is hypoxic encephalopathy. Wood's death devastated people who were close to him and people who barely knew him. One of Andrew's best friends, Chris Cornell of Soundgarden, was absolutely devastated by his loss. The members of Alice in Chains were also heartbroken over Andy's loss. Purple is the second studio album by Stone Temple Pilots, released on June 7, 1994 by Atlantic Records. The album, building on the foundation laid by the band's debut album Core, was a major commercial success, debuting at number 1 on the Billboard 200 with 252,000 copies sold in its first week. It remained at the top of the chart for 3 weeks, eventually selling over 6 million copies. It spawned a number of successful singles. Vaseline and Interstate Love Song both topped the mainstream rock tracks chart and reached number 2 on the modern rock tracks chart, while Big Empty also reached the top 10 on both charts. Singles was a 1992 film set in the early grunge movement in Seattle. The movie features cameos by Soundgarden and Alice in Chains. Pearl Jam also played the role of fictional band Citizen Dick. Hole was a band formed in Los Angeles, California in 1989. It was founded by singer and guitarist Courtney Love and guitarist Eric Erlandson. It had several different bassists and drummers, the most prolific being drummer Patty Schmiel and bassist Kristen Pfaff. Hole released a total of 4 studio albums between 2 incarnations, spanning the 1990s and early 2010s, and became one of the most commercially successful rock bands in history, fronted by a woman. Hole's albums, Celebrity Skin and Live Through This, were both commercially successful. However, in 2002, the band disbanded. 8 years later, in 2010, Hole was reformed by Love with new members, despite Erlandsen's claim that the reformation breached a mutual contract he had with her. The reformed band released the album Nobody's Daughter, which was conceived as Love's second solo album. In 2013, Love retired the Hole name, releasing new material and touring as a solo artist.
I hate it. I'm not playing rock and roll. Yeah, I'd like to make an order, please. Okay, 2 strawberry orange juices, 1 scrambled egg, and hash browns, right? French toast pancake. Carrot muffins. And, 1 pot of coffee for 2 people. Or 3, one big pot of coffee. Do you want some coffee? Would you like some coffee? I don't believe in Chanel. Women are the future of rock and roll, and that's it. Get some guitars. This is the 90s. Empower yourself.
Shortly before Kurt Cobain's death in 1994, Chris Novoselic drove Kurt to the airport, where he was leaving by plane to go to LA to attend rehab. Kurt then lashed out, and the bandmates got into a physical altercation in front of a crowd of people in the SeaTac airport in Seattle. Chris has never publicly spoke about this incident. MTV Unplugged in New York was the first live album by Nirvana, released by DGC Records on November 1st, 1994, nearly 7 months following the death of Kurt Cobain. The album was part of the cable television series MTV Unplugged and features a mostly acoustic performance. It was recorded at Sony Music Studios in Hell's Kitchen on November 18th, 1993. The show was directed by Beth McCarthy and aired on the cable television network MTV on December 16th, 1993. In a break with MTV Unplugged tradition, Nirvana played mainly lesser-known material and covers of songs by the Vaselines, David Bowie, Leadbelly, and Meat Puppets. Unlike prior MTV Unplugged performances, which were entirely acoustic, Nirvana used electrical amplification and guitar effects during the set. Alice in Chains, occasionally referred to as Three-Legged Dog and Tripod, is the third studio album by Alice in Chains. It was released on November 7th, 1995 by Columbia Records, and what was the follow-up to the highly successful Dirt. This is the band's first full-length studio album to feature bassist Mike Inez, and their last studio album to feature Layton Staley, before its death in 2002. It is also their final studio album to be released through Columbia. As with their previous releases, the album's songs focus on heavy emotional content and subject matter, such as drug addiction, depression, religion, broken relationships, and the internal tensions within the band. The album's music relies less on metallic riffs and more on melody and a similar sound to that of their Jar of Flies EP. Mad Season played their first show at the Crocodile Cafe on October 12, 1994. For that performance, they used the name The Gacy Bunch, a reference to serial killer John Wayne Gacy and the TV show The Brady Bunch. According to a bootleg recording of the show, the set consisted of early versions of songs that would appear on Above, in instrumental form or without fully developed lyrics, and an instrumental cover of Jimi Hendrix's Voodoo Child. Mad Season released their 1995 album, titled Above, to great acclaim. Songs like Wake Up and Long Gone Day featuring Mark Lanegan are hit songs even today. The end of grunge was seemingly after the death of Kurt Cobain and the long hiatus of Alice in Chains. In 1997, Soundgarden received another Grammy Award nomination for the lead single Pretty Noose. As tensions grew within the band, reportedly due to internal strife over its creative direction, Soundgarden announced that it was disbanding on April 9, 1997. In a 1998 interview, Kim Thale said, "It was pretty obvious from everybody's general attitude over the course of the previous half year that there was some dissatisfaction.
This is the Week in Rock. With the grunge period of the early 90s slowly receding into rock history, Soundgarden, the metal-edged Seattle band, called it quits this week after 12 years and one chart-topping album. No reason was given, just a terse notice through the group's record company that the split was amicable and mutual. Here's a look back at the band that was. Soundgarden's members Chris Cornell, Kim Thale, Ben Shepherd, and Matt Cameron haven't announced any future plans yet. The band played its last concert in Honolulu on February 9th. You can see lots of Soundgarden concert footage on MTV News online, by the way, at mtv.com.
In 1997, after the death of Layne Staley's longtime girlfriend Demery, Layne moved into his Seattle condo and became a drug-addicted recluse for years. He would very rarely leave the apartment, and as the years went by, he was seemingly forgotten by the music world. In the late 90s, Mark Lanigan was severely addicted to heroin and was living with a homeless addict inside his apartment. Eventually, a Seattle cop informed Mark he could either leave town or be arrested. Mark chose to leave his apartment and become a homeless drug runner for Seattle dealers. Demery Perot was the longtime girlfriend of Layne Staley of Alice in Chains. She was also hooked on heroin, and her and Layne had an off-again, on-again relationship. By 1996, Demery was not with Layne anymore and was dating a much older man. On October 29, 1996, after becoming unresponsive inside her boyfriend's car, she was rushed to the hospital, where she later died of a heart condition caused by her excessive heroin use. Nirvana's self-titled album, which was released in 2002, was largely focused on the unreleased song You Know You're Right. The song had leaked online, and Courtney Love, Dave Grohl, and Chris Novoselic were engaged in a heated lawsuit over control of Nirvana's legacy. In September 2002, it was officially announced that the lawsuit had been settled and that You Know You're Right would be released on Nirvana, a greatest hits compilation or one CD history of the band, in November, with the box set to follow in 2004. However, the release of the greatest hits set was pushed forward to October 29, 2002. In May 2017, after Soundgarden played a show in the Fox Theater in Detroit, Chris Cornell returned to his hotel room. A short while later, Chris's bodyguard Martin Kristen got a phone call from Chris's wife asking him to check on Cornell. Martin tried the door and it was locked. Eventually, Kristen kicked down the door and discovered Chris dead by his own hand inside the bathroom. Chris's death was yet another blow to the 90s alternative music community and marked the end of Soundgarden forever.
News this morning, rocker Chris Cornell has passed away. He gained fame as the lead singer of Soundgarden and then later Audioslave. You may be familiar with those bands. The 52-year-old died unexpectedly in Detroit. They just gotten there on tour. An autopsy will be conducted to find out exactly why he died. The family asking for...
Based on the available evidence, the last person to see Layne alive was Mike Starr. On April 4th, 2002, Mike's 37th birthday, they met at Layne's apartment. "I'm sick," Layne told his friend. In addition to the toll years of addiction had taken on his body, Layne also had hepatitis C, presumably the result of intravenous drug use. Layne was channel surfing and stumbled upon the John Edward program, Crossing Over, in which a psychic medium did readings for audience members. He turned to Mike and said, "Demery was here last night. I don't give a fuck if you believe me or not, dude. I'm telling you, Demery was here last night." Mike, who was high on benzodiazepine, later said he was with Layne that day, trying to keep him alive, and offered to call 911. Layne refused and threatened to never speak to him again if he did. Layne got agitated, telling Mike he was too high. Layne would get upset with him when Mike was on benzodiazepines. "You're an idiot on these pills," Layne told Mike. Mike had enough. "Fine, I'll just leave," he told Layne. Layne, perhaps thinking he had made a mistake, said, "Not like this, don't leave like this," or "Not like this, I can't believe that." These would be his final words to his friend he had known for nearly 15 years. At some point on April 5th, 2002, Layne used heroin and cocaine, known as a speedball. Nobody will ever know precisely what Layne did on the final day of his life, or his state of mind at the time. On April 5th, 2002, Layne Staley died at the age of 34.
Hi, welcome to CNN Headline News. I'm Anna Hovind. The lead singer of the rock band Alice in Chains has been found dead in his Seattle home. The partially decomposed body of 34-year-old Lane Staley was discovered Friday night. Medical examiners identified it during an autopsy.
Throughout the history of Alice in Chains, Lane Staley was not the only one who went through substance abuse issues. Jerry Cantrell was also going through severe clinical depression from the deaths of his mother and his friend, Andrew Wood, and used Xanax, an anxiety medication prescribed by his doctor, to ease his depression as well as his heavy drinking on tour. Quote, "I was going through a tough time. Everyone was. But that's what made the album stronger and more intense. I look back on that period of time as the longest 4 years of sex, drugs, and alcohol we all went through," Cantrell said in a 2000 interview with the Seattle Times. Jerry abused Xanax, alcohol, while also being a heavy smoker. Some have claimed he also used crack cocaine, but that hasn't been confirmed by Jerry or the rest of the band. There isn't a ton known about Jerry's struggle, as you can tell he keeps his emotions and personal life very private, and understandably so. After the sudden wake-up call of losing one of his close friends to substance abuse, Cantrell made the leap to defeat his demons and successfully got sober in 2003. Mike Starr was the original bassist for Alice in Chains. After being fired from the band, Mike went to a dark place and continued his severe heroin addiction. Mike's drug buddy at this time was none other than his own father. After not being able to save his best friend Lane from his addiction, Mike carried the guilt of being the last person to see him for the rest of his life. In the late 90s, Starr allegedly attempted to rob Mark Lanigan for drugs. On March 8, 2011, at 1:42 p.m., police were called to a home in Salt Lake City where they found Starr's body. There were no indications of foul play, and authorities suspected Starr died of a drug overdose. After the death of Kurt Cobain, Chris Novoselic moved into the Washington countryside and took a hiatus from music. He got his pilot's license in 2002 and is part of the Forward Party of Washington's board of members. He also started a new band called Third Secret with members of Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. On June 16, 1994, bassist for Courtney Love's band Hole was found dead in her Seattle apartment. Kristen Pfaff was found unresponsive in her bathtub by her friend Paul Erickson. Kristen's death was ruled an accidental overdose of heroin. In 1993, Kristen was playing with her band Janitor Joe in a Seattle club when Hole frontwoman Courtney Love introduced herself to Kristen. Hole had just signed with Geffen Records, and they're about to start recording a new album. Hole's bassist, Leslie Hardy, had recently parted ways with the band, and Kristen was offered the job. After some convincing and a large financial offer, Kristen accepted and was crowned Hole's temporary bassist. On December 1st, 2015, Weiland appeared in an interview with 102.1 The Edge. In the interview, Scott seems off and looks much older than his 48 years. On Wednesday, December 2nd, in Chicago, the Wildabouts bus stopped after a show in Toronto. The next morning, according to a crew member on the bus, Weiland woke up at 9, used the bathroom, and then returned to bed. Sometime later, after they had arrived in Bloomington, Minnesota, Black knocked on the singer's door to invite him to breakfast, but Weiland didn't answer. This wasn't unusual. He slept late. That was one custom everyone observed. If Scott's asleep, we leave him. So when the band and crew headed out to the Mall of America to shop for Christmas presents, they left him behind, like always. At 7 p.m. in Minnesota, she called Aaron Moeller, the band's tour manager, and a former Marine, who promised to wake the singer. Around 8 p.m., Moeller entered the tour bus, which was parked behind a Marriott Courtyard Inn. Weiland was lying on his left side in a fetal position. His hands were by his head, and his eyes were half closed. I shook his leg and thought, oh my god, he's not moving. I went to his shoulders and realized he was stiff. Moeller called drummer Joey Castillo, who sprinted there from the lobby. He looked for a pulse along Weiland's neck, but couldn't find one. Then a crew member called to break the terrible news. Honey, he's dead. He's not coming back. I just fell to the floor, Jamie remembers. Police arrived within minutes. I was in tears, says Maybury. It was like it's all over. Scott's gone. The band's finished. There's no more music, and we're going home. It was the worst. Shannon Hoon was the lead singer for Blind Melon. Blind Melon's song, No Rain, became a hit and ascended the band up the musical ladder. In June 1995, Hoon entered rehab for a month. On July 11, 1995, Hoon and his girlfriend, Lisa Krause, had a daughter named Nico Blue. After a disappointing performance at the Numbers Club in Houston on October 20th, Hoon undertook an all-night drug binge. The next day, Blind Melon was scheduled to play a show in New Orleans. The band's sound engineer, Lyle Eves, went to the tour bus to awaken Hoon for a sound check, but Hoon was unresponsive. An ambulance arrived, and Hoon was pronounced dead at the scene at the age of 28. His death was attributed to a cocaine overdose.
I'm Kurt Loder with an MTV News Brief. Blind Melon frontman Shannon Hoon was found dead in the band's tour bus in New Orleans on Saturday afternoon. He was 28 years old. The exact cause of Hoon's death will have to be determined by a coroner, but Hoon had serious alcohol and drug problems and had been in rehab twice this year. He was arrested for public drunkenness in New Orleans last October, had urinated on stage during a show in Vancouver on Halloween of 1993, and was arrested for creating a disturbance at the American Music Awards in February of 1994.